this time on the topic linguistic and cultural identity in regimes of territorial autonomy, organized by the Permanent Mission of the Kingdom of Morocco to the United Nations in New York. Let me remind that on the 11th of April 2007, Morocco presented to the UN Secretary General its initiative for negotiating an autonomy statute for the Sahara region in order to break the stalemate in negotiations on the regional disputes about Sahara. The UN Security Council, in successive 16 resolutions, welcomed the, quote, serious and credible Moroccan efforts to move the process forward towards resolution, end quote. It also encouraged, quote, the parties to demonstrate further political will towards a solution, including by expanding upon their discussion of each other's proposals and recommitting to UN efforts in a spirit of realism and compromise, end quote. And the Security Council also encouraged, quote, neighboring countries to make contributions to the political process, stressing the importance of all concerned expanding on their positions in order to advance a solution, end quote. So as a contribution to the discussion of the parties' proposals, since 2009, Morocco initiated a series of international academic comparative seminars in person and online on several aspects of territorial autonomy, such as self-determination, human rights, institutions, natural resources, negotiations, regionalization, development models, the role of civil society, external relations, settlement of political disputes, legislative, judicial, and executive powers, attraction of foreign investment, etc. These comparative studies, including the many cases of autonomous regions, such as Aceh in Indonesia, Andalusia, Catalonia in Spain, and today we'll hear about the Basque Country in Spain as well, the Azores and Madeira in Portugal, Bangsamoro in the Philippines, the British Crown dependencies and Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom, the Caribbean island states, the Faroe Islands and Greenland in Denmark, Northeast India, Iraqi Kurdistan, the autonomous regions of Italy, including South Tyrol, the states of Mexico, New Caledonia in France, and today we'll hear also about Corsica, Newfoundland, Nunavut, and Quebec in Canada, the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, Puerto Rico in the United States, and the provinces of Spain, Vojvodina in Serbia, Wallonia in Belgium, Zanzibar in Tanzania, etc. So it's a long list. The proceedings of all these seminars have been published by Morocco and are available on a dedicated website, www.academicautonomynetwork, in one word.com. We'll focus today on the topic linguistic and cultural identity in regimes of territorial autonomy, and our seminar will offer the opportunity to compare the regulations or practices in 4 more or less autonomous regions: the Spanish Basque Country, the French island of Corsica, the Chinese Special Administrative Region of Macau, and the constituent country of Aruba within the Netherlands. In each case, we will look at similarities and differences with the Moroccan initiative for the autonomy of the Sahara region regarding that aspect of linguistic and cultural identity. Let me remind that the initiative for the Sahara region includes several provisions that relate to cultural and linguistic identity. In Article 5, it says that the Sahara population will themselves run their affairs democratically through legislative, executive, and judicial bodies, enjoying exclusive powers. They will have the financial resources needed for the region's development in all fields and will take an active part in the nation's economic, social, and cultural life. In Article 12, it says that in keeping with democratic principles and procedures, and acting through legislative, executive, and judicial bodies, the populations of the Sahara Autonomous Region shall exercise powers within the region's territorial boundaries, mainly over the following, and then, of course, comes a very detailed list, including in the social sector, housing, education, health, employment, sports, social welfare, and social security, as well as cultural affairs, including the promotion of the Saharan Hassani cultural heritage. Now, despite a gradual shift from nomadism to urbanization, the Sahrawi populations have retained their Hassaniya dialect as of Arabic, as well as many aspects of Sahrawi identity and subjectivities like forms of dress, social customs, poetry, song, cultural festivals, and the continued use of tents in urban spaces for social gathering. There is a museum of Saharan arts founded at the headquarters of the House of Culture in La Ayoun, and the construction of a complex for craft industry has allowed for the raising in the level of education and expertise of the young craftsmen. This sector is experiencing more growth and dynamism through its link and coordination with the tourism sector. All these activities are developed locally, but with the support of the Moroccan government. The Hassaniya Arabic dialect is a dialect of Maghrebi Arabic and is spoken across the Sahara region. It's an important expression of Sahrawi identity within Morocco. This idiom gets its name from the Beni Hassan tribes that invaded the region in the 11th and 13th centuries, conquered local Sanhaja Berber tribes. As a traditionally oral culture, sharing stories, fables, poems, and songs in Hassaniya has been part of Sahrawi society for centuries. It's often a part of the traditional Sahrawi tea ceremony. Through oral accounts, Sahrawis have documented aspects of their daily life and their nomadic travels, as well as preserved their collective historical memories. The Sahrawi oral tradition encompasses poetry, it includes poetry, storytelling, and proverbs. Proverbs are an integral part of educating children and reminding adults of moral and values. Other languages spoken in the region include Berber languages, as well as Spanish, inherited from the colonial period, and mostly spoken by the older generation of Sahrawis that contribute to the linguistic diversity of the region, along with the two official languages of Morocco, modern Standard Arabic and Standard Moroccan Berber. The Sahrawi cultural identity is therefore a mix of Arab, Berber, and local influences shaped by their nomadic lifestyle and the historical context of colonization. The Moroccan Initiative for the Autonomy of the Sahara region offers an opportunity for the populations of that region to preserve, to promote, and to make the best use of their linguistic and cultural identity. In any case, it's now time to look at the experience of the other autonomous regions that may be quite different from the situation in the Sahara region, but may also provide useful models that could inspire the future authorities of the autonomous Sahara region. We will focus on some questions, such as the following ones. Is the Statute of Autonomy, in the Statute of Autonomy, does the regional government exert exclusive competencies regarding education, preservation of the regional language and culture, or are these domains shared with the central government? Second, does the regional government appoint personnel dealing with the preservation of regional culture and linguistic identity alone, or is it the prerogative of the central government? Is this power shared between both governments. Third, are there institutional modalities for ensuring that regional cultural and linguistic identity is preserved also at the national level? Does the national government have a power to prevent or suspend any regional activity related to the preservation of regional cultural and linguistic identity, such as teaching in the regional language in regional schools, or allowing regional media to use and spread regional language and culture? And finally, is the regional language recognized as one of the national official languages, or is it allowed to be taught and used only at the regional level? So, according to our program, we should have started with the Basque country, but we had a request from our colleagues from Macau to start because it's already 10 p.m. for them. So thank you again for joining us, making this effort of staying up late, and we'll give you the floor. Both of you worked on the article, the paper, and probably you will share the time in the presentation. Let me briefly introduce you. Dr. Vanessa Fernandez Amaro is Associate Professor at the Center for Portuguese Studies at Macau Polytechnic University, with a research focus on language, cultural studies, and post-colonial identity. She holds a PhD in communication studies from the University of Macau, and her work explores the legacies of Portuguese colonialism in Macau, particularly as they are reflected in linguistic practices, multilingual narratives, and the formation of hybrid identities. Her research addresses topics such as linguistic attitudes, colonial era symbols, and the symbolic reinterpretation of heritage. Bridging sociolinguistics and cultural studies, she employs ethnographic methods to investigate how colonial histories are embedded in language. And Dr. Julio Reis Jatoba holds a PhD in literary and intercultural studies from the University of Macau, before joining the University of Macau first as senior instructor from 2016 to 2025, and as an assistant professor since this year. He served as a lecturer for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies in Guangzhou, China, from 2010 to 2015, having taught at various institutions in China since 2006. His research and teaching focus on language policies for multilingualism, language ideologies, heritage languages, language education and translation studies, and currently serves as Deputy Institutional Coordinator of the UNESCO Chair, Language Policy for Multilingualism at University of Macau. So I'm really pleased after having read your impressive biographies to give you the floor to tell us more about the specificities of the Macau Autonomous Region. Over to you.
Thank you very much for listening to us and having us here today. So I'm Vanessa, and this is my colleague, Julio, and we'll be presenting this together because we have been doing this research also together. So now we will be exploring how Macau has transformed its inherent bilingualism into a model for inclusive language planning. Over this presentation, we will walk you through Macau's linguistic ecology, its legal and educational structures, everyday language practice, and finally compare it with another multilingual autonomy case, the Western Sahara case.
Sorry, may we share the screen, please, to show our PPT? We are disabled to
share. Yeah, we are not able to share our screen.
Yes, Hisham, can you authorize sharing?
Okay,
now it's yes.
A gente já vai para o slide 2. Sorry, 1 minute, please.
Yes, okay. So let's begin by locating Macau. So Macau is a small territory on the southern coast of China, just about 70 kilometers west of Hong Kong. On the map, it might look just like a pin, but that pin holds centuries of global exchange. And depending on who you ask, you will hear Macau called in different ways. Alman in Cantonese, Alman in Mandarin, Macau in English, or Macau in Portuguese. These four names tell us something important. Even before we dive into history, Macau's identity is already multilingual, multicultural, and shaped by layers of influence. This linguistic diversity isn't just symbolic, it's part of daily life. So whether you are in a cafe, a classroom, or a courtroom, chances are you will hear more than one language being spoken. So how this small corner of the world becomes such a fascinating intersection of language and cultures. So for that, we need to go back in time.
For this, let's step back nearly 5 centuries. In 1555, Portuguese traders were granted to foothold on a rock peninsula at the mouth of the Pure River, an event that would ripple across East Asia. Almost overnight, Macau became the pivot of a maritime triangle linking Goa, Malacca, and Nagasaki. Spices, silver, silk, and stores surged through its docks. From the very beginning, there was settlement for merchants and missionaries. Commerce, not cannons, gave the city its many tongues. Yet Macau was never a typical colony legally. It remained Chinese soil, administered under a delicate, negotiated balance of power. Portuguese civic life and Chinese sovereignty run in parallel, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in quiet tension, shaping the hybridity found nowhere else in the colonial world. Why does that matter? Because today, Macau, its architecture, its language, even its cuisine, it's still an echo of that was 450 years experiment in shared rule.
So let's fast forward to the 20th century. As an atypical colony, Macau also experienced an atypical decolonization process. In 1987, the Sino-Portuguese Joint Declaration paved the way for a peaceful and negotiated handover, not through revolution or conflict, but through diplomacy. At midnight on December 20th, 1999, Macau officially became a special administrative region of China under the one country, two systems principle. Rather than becoming an independent nation, Macau remained part of China while retaining a high degree of autonomy in key areas. These include its own legal system, immigration controls, currency, education policies, and official languages. While sovereignty rests with China, Macau governs itself in most internal affairs under its basic law, which functions as a mini constitution, and it's set to remain in effect until 2049. One of the most distinctive features of post-handover Macau is its constitutional bilingualism. Chinese and Portuguese are both official languages. But the story doesn't stop here. Today, English has become more visible, especially in tourism and business. Migrant languages like Tagalog, Vietnamese, Bahasa Indonesian, or Nepali are part of the city's soundscape too. So what makes Macau so interesting for us as researchers? It offers a living case study of how a place can navigate its colonial past, the reality of Chinese sovereignty, and the pressures of globalization, all through its language policies and everyday multilingualism.
Now, let's situate Macau in the present. Macau is small but intense. Its total area is just over 33 square kilometers. That includes the peninsula and the islands of Taipa and Kolowani. And yet, despite its size, Macau is home to around 608,000 people, making it one of the most densely populated places in the world. In Macau, you never feel alone. The population is predominantly Chinese, but there are important communities as a Portuguese-speaking countries, communities, and a growing number of migrant workers from Southeast Asia. Economically, Macau is driven by service, with a strong focus on tourism, gaming, retail, conventions, and hospitality. It has one of the highest GDPs per capita globally, but it's important to note that this wealth comes from a highly concentrated economy. It's still heavily dependent on the casino and the tourism sectors. So when you talk about Macau, you are talking about a place that is small in size, but global in its reach, complex in its identity, and central to conversations about multilingualism, post-colonial transitions, and global urban life.
So in 2005, the historic center of Macau was officially inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. What makes it so special? It's not just a collection of old buildings, it's living record of over 400 years of cultural blending between Portugal and China. Within this small area, you will find more than 20 historic sites, temples and churches, public squares, and colonial fortress, each one reflecting a piece of Macau's layered identity. Tells the city east meets west architecture, Baroque facades beside Chinese courtyards, for example, tells a story of religious tolerance, global trade, and cultural coexistence that stretch from the 16th century to nowadays. So when we walk through the historic center today, we are not just seeing beautiful buildings for taking photos. We are witnessing a rare symbol of dialogue between Europe and Asia, preserved in stone, brick, and spirit.
Let's set off the heart of the old city, Senado Square. Its wave-pattern Portuguese cobblestones and pastel neoclassic facades are striking reminders for over 4 centuries of Portuguese presence. But while the architecture speaks Portuguese, the sounds of the squares have always been distinctly Cantonese, and today increasingly Mandarin, as visitors from mainland China make up the largest shares of Macau tourists. And not just Mandarin. Walk through Senado Square and you hear language from around the world because Macau welcomes over 30 million visitors each year. This vibrant multilingual space, part stage, part meeting point, has long been a kind of hybrid civic salon where East and West first meet on equal footing and where that exchange continues to unfold every day.
So a 5-minute climb brings us to the ruins of St. Paul's, the Baroque facade of 19th century Jesuit college. The reliefs fuse Christian iconography with Chinese lions and peonies, a stone sermon on cultural accommodation. Missionary work in Macau never meant erasing local identity, it meant layering meanings.
Just behind that Jesuit granite wall stands the tiny Nacha Temple, one of Macau's oldest Taoist shrines. 2 religions share a literal party wall. Catholic stone face Taoist incense. Few places capture religious coexistence more vividly than these 20 meters encounter.
So heading south to the Barra district, you can see here in the photo, the Dom Pedro V Theater, the first Western-style playhouse in East Asia. Its Italianate Portico once welcomed Portuguese drama. Today, the same stage hosts Cantonese opera. Architecture import, local performance, cultural code switching in real time.
Just 500 meters away, we arrive at the Mandarin's house, a large Qing-era scholar home. Here, European stucco gives way to the curved Chinese roofs, lattice windows, and Suzhou-style courtyards. The theater and the mansion sit close together, but their style remains completely different.
But heritage in Macau isn't just seen in buildings. It's lived through traditions. Every year, processions like Our Lady of Fatima and the Nacha Festival follow the same streets. They share lion dancers, marching bands, and even bilingual prayers. Catholic and Chinese calendars overlap, turning faith into conversation.
On the left is the Festival of the Drunken Dragon. Every spring, fishermen carry wooden dragon heads, sip rice wine, and dance through another square, handing out dragon rice for luck. It's noisy, lively, and proudly Cantonese. On the right, the Passion Procession of Our Lord Jesus takes place every Good Friday. A life-size Christ is carried from San Domingo's church with incense, hymns in Portuguese and Cantonese, and the slow beat of drums. In Macau, heritage is shared, not separated. Faith and language flow together in public life.
So these layered traditions, religious, cultural, and linguistic, aren't just symbolic. They are part of daily life in Macau. Multilingualism literally is built into the city's physical fabric. So street signs, a transport system, and public services display Chinese and Portuguese side by side, with English often added as a third layer. Let's first get a sense of what multilingualism actually looks and feels like on the streets of Macau.
In Macau, language is just spoken. It's written into the city itself. By law, every street plaque pairs Portuguese and Chinese, a policy dating back to 1991, and now protected under the Article 9 of the Basic Law. It guarantees both language equal status in public administration and law. The second image shows how English is added as a third layer wherever visitors need guidance. Trilingual tourist signs like these are common in the UNESCO zone, reflecting Macau image as both a heritage site and global tourism and gaming hub. In short, multilingual policy here isn't abstract. It's part of the city's permanent urban landscape.
And mobility reinforces the multilingual pattern. So at bus stops, you will see Chinese and Portuguese side by side. On the newer light rail transit system, you can see here in the second photo, all three working languages, Chinese, Portuguese, and English, appear on every platform sign. And once you are on board, the language mix grows even richer. Each stop is announced in 4 spoken languages: Cantonese, Mandarin, Portuguese, and English. So Macau transport system becomes a kind of moving classroom where the co-official languages ride alongside 2 global giants.
But signage in Macau isn't just top-down. Now we shift from official language policy to everyday community voices. Take this Thai eatery, for example. It layers 3 write systems: Chinese characters, Cantonese transliteration, and Thai. Next door, our parcel shop does its own juggling act using English, Thai, Chinese, Tagalog, and Bahasa Indonesia. These grassroots signs show us that official bilingualism exists along a rich multilingual economy shaped by immigrant communities who made themselves visible using whatever scripts, sticker paper, or language combinations they had at hand.
So far we have seen how multilingualism plays out on walls and moving vehicles, but what about the bigger picture in Macau? So let's now map Macau's linguistic ecosystem. So at the core, it's Cantonese, the mother tongue of nearly 80% of residents. Surrounding it are Mandarin, promoted for national integration, Portuguese protected as a co-official language, English widely used in tourism, gaming, and academia, and a growing circle of migrant languages is spoken by almost a third of the city's workforce. Balancing this complex mix socially, politically, and economically is one of the central challenges Macau faces today, and is also the focus of the research we have been working on.
From this official data, a clear pattern emerges. Cantonese remains the dominant home language. Mandarin and other Chinese dialects have held steady, while Portuguese, despite its co-official status, is spoken at home by only 0.6% of the population. In contrast, English and Tagalog are on the rise, driven by the growth of tourism, international education, and a substantial migrant workforce.
So now you might be wondering, if so few people speak Portuguese at home, why does it still have such a strong presence in public life? So the answer lies in the legal foundation of Macau bilingualism. So Article 9 of the Basic Law guarantees the equal status of Chinese and Portuguese in all areas of public administration, legislation, and the courts. And guiding all of this is a concept promoted by Chinese scholars called a harmonious language life. It's a vision of balance and peaceful coexistence that shapes Macau's approach to language policy today.
The 99 handover didn't disrupt bilingualism. It actually reinforced it. Under the one country, two system principle, 一国两制 in Chinese, bilingual governance was not only preserved, it was strengthened. Instead of cutting back Portuguese, both Beijing and Macau expand investment in it, promoting Portuguese language education and training civil servants to ensure administrative continuity. Why this commitment? Because Macau was being positioned for a new diplomatic role as a bridge between China and the Portuguese-speaking world. The role took shape in 2003 with the creation of Forum Macau, a platform for economic and political cooperation between China and Portuguese-speaking countries like Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, and Portugal, which Macau serving as both host and symbolic mediator. In this way, language policy became not only a tool for internal governance, but a strategic asset for China's global diplomacy.
So domain matters when it comes to language use. Cantonese still dominates informal everyday life, but it's Mandarin and English that are gaining ground in spaces where power and profit concentrates. Mandarin is now part of civil servant training and school curricula. English is compulsory in all schools and is the medium of instruction for most university courses. Employers are also increasingly looking for trilingual staff, fluent in Cantonese, Mandarin, and English. So in short, language use in Macau follows the flow of opportunity.
As of March 2025, there are over 183 non-resident workers in the city, making up a significant part of the population. About 35% come from Southeast Asia, especially the Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia. Their presence is increasingly visible in the city signage. Tagalog, Thai, and Indonesian now appear in restaurants, parcel shops, and public notice, Macau's public broadcaster has also responded, often offering regular radio and TV programs in this language. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for the first time, official health announcements were issued in migrant languages.
So schools are the engine of language planning in Macau. So the government sets clear proficient targets, like a minimum of 3,000 Chinese characters, 150 hours per year of Portuguese were offered, and specific benchmarks for oral Mandarin and English at different levels. So these targets matter because they turn legal principles into practical skills, bridging the gap between policy and everyday language ability.
Macau 2006 education law sets clear benchmarks for language learning. But in practice, schools follow very different models. We see everything from mainstream Cantonese medium school to English medium internationals to just a handful of Portuguese medium or bilingual Chinese-Portuguese programs. There are even 2 experimental trilingual schools using Mandarin, Portuguese, and English. But this remains the exception. So in reality, parents choose from a wide spectrum, and that choice reflects market demand and more than any strict government assignment.
So the government here in Macau continually promotes Macau as a bridge between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries, and education is key to that vision. Today, over 3,000 students are learning Portuguese from an early age. 5 out of 10 local universities now offer full Portuguese language degree programs. There are also scholarships, teacher exchange, and joint initiatives with Portugal and Brazil.
The government continuously promotes.
Survey data shows a trend. So students see Portuguese as difficult, but useful, especially for securing civil service jobs, as Chinese and Portuguese proficiency are still an asset. It's valued more for its instrumental benefits than for any cultural or personal connection. As the students put it, Portuguese is tough, but it gets me a government post. Without deeper engagement, motivation tends to stay utilitarian. And that means retention can weaken once the external rewards disappear. So the language landscape isn't just about policy. It's also about access, opportunity, and perception.
English is both a passport to the world and a social divider. It's the lingua franca of the tourism gaming international business, and demand is rising. As a result, international and IB schools are expanding across the city, but access isn't equal. Families who can afford international education give their children a major head start in English, while students in the public stream often rely on limited classroom exposure. This growing gap reinforces education and social divides, making English not just a tool for opportunity, but also a matter of privilege.
So Patois is Macau's traditional Creole, once spoken by the Macanese community. It blends Portuguese with Cantonese, Malay, and other influences. Today, Patois survives more on stage than in daily life. It's no longer used in kitchens or passed down at home. So the annual Doce Papiação theater performance keep it audible just 2 nights a year. In 2021, the play was officially recognized as part of Macau's intangible cultural heritage. But with fewer than 50 fluent speakers and no generational transmission, UNESCO classifies Patois as severely endangered. Without everyday use, it risks becoming a symbolic revival rather than a living language.
Portuguese holds legal and institutional weight, but is rarely spoken at home. At the same time, shortage of qualified teachers in both Portuguese and English limit effective language instruction. Migrant communities face another challenge. While their languages are socially vital, they receive little formal support. Inclusion remains ad hoc, not systemic. Other tensions are emerging too. Portuguese is frequently seen as prestigious symbol, but with limited daily function. Mandarin is a rising status, potentially displacing Cantonese and widening linguistic divides. And as a Portuguese becomes as a gateway language to scholarship or civil service, its cultural depth risks being lost, reduced to a utilitarian tool. The challenge move forward is this. How do we align institutional prestige with lived experience and ensure that linguistic diversity doesn't become communicative inequality?
So before we begin a comparison between Macau and the Western Sahara, let us first clarify two important points for us. First, as researchers, we are most familiar with the situation in Macau, which is where our primary data comes from. So this comparison with the Western Sahara is meant as an academic exercise. It's a way to reflect on how different multilingual models are taking shape in distinctive contexts. Second, we also want to clearly state our neutrality regarding any political or foreign affairs issues. Our focus is on language policy, education, and cultural inclusion, not on sovereignty or territorial debates. So with that in mind, let's look at how Macau and the Western Sahara approach multilingualism from a constitutional and community perspective.
In Macau, the basic law names Chinese and Portuguese as a co-official language. This legal foundation supports the daily use of Cantonese, Mandarin, and Portuguese, and increasingly English, especially in tourism, education, and business. Here, multilingualism isn't just on paper, it's visible and lives in the classrooms, courts, and public spaces. In contrast, the 2017 Morocco autonomy proposal for the West Sahara recognized Hassaniya Arabic and promise cultural self-management under Moroccan sovereignty. But key details, especially around education law, are still being to be worked out. Community language also reflects this difference. In Macau, Patois theater and Tagalog media are visible and supported to some extent. In the Sahara, Hanasia is central to identity, seen in poetry, crafts, and festival, but still absent from school curricula and formal institutions. So while Macau multilingualism is already operational, grounded in law and practice, the Sahara remains largely aspirational, with recognition outpacing implementation.
So with its legal bilingualism and working education system, Macau offers a concrete model of multilingual autonomy. So Morocco's proposal for Western Sahara shares similar goals, autonomy, cultural protection, and recognition of local languages, but remains mostly aspirational. Macau shows that inclusion requires more than legal promises. It takes teacher training, funding, curriculum support, and real engagement with communities. We argue that symbolic recognition means little without structural change.
We close with three key lessons from Macau experience. First, symbolic recognition is not enough. Laws must be funded with investment in teacher training, curriculum, cultural protection, and long-term planning. Second, successful language policy must engage not only institutions, but also communities. Support from bottom-up initiatives gives multilingualism roots in daily life. Third, multilingualism is more than heritage. It's strategic capital. Macau markets Portuguese for diplomas, sustain Cantonese for local identity, and use English and Mandarin for global reach. Macau shows that multilingualism governance can be constructed, not just inherited. With the right balance of legal protection, community engagement, and strategic vision, language policy becomes a tool for both inclusion and international positioning.
So we hope this presentation has offered some useful insights into the complexities of multilingual governance. So, obrigada, Dodje, Xie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa and Giulio. It was really fascinating. Of course, as you recognize yourself, Macau is not very well known throughout the world, but it certainly is a fascinating case study, especially in this comparative exercise with other regions, and in particular the project for the Sahara region. Thank you so much for this presentation, this research. Of course, your article is even more detailed, and we'll be happy to circulate it and publish it. Of course, I will not summarize your points, just that your very honest and candid comparison with the project of Morocco for Sahara is very accurate. The fact is that, as you understand, this is only a sort of umbrella provision, you know, and then as we know, the devil is in the detail. So what Morocco has been trying to do for years now is to push for a detailed negotiation of an agreement with all the parties that obviously will include more details on education, culture, preservation of linguistic diversity, etc. And as you say in your conclusions, the key factor is not only a legal status, but also all the resources, the facilities, the teaching, and this is where you recognize that even in Macau, where you have this extensive legal protection for a minority language spoken by a small minority of the people, you need to rely on enough teachers, trained teachers, and a good aspect, of course, which is, I think, specific to Macau, is the fact that because of this colonial heritage of the Portuguese language, it is now able and allowed, and China benefits from this, to develop relations with Portuguese-speaking countries. When I make my conclusions, I will talk a little bit about the international status and role of autonomous regions in international relations. And we'll see that in the case of the Sahara region, the status will include some degree of potential for regional cooperation with other regions, especially in the Mediterranean region. So thank you so much again for staying up late. And of course, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the seminar, but we'll understand if you prefer to go to bed because it's already quite late for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
and
very much.
Now we move on to the Spanish Basque country with Dr. Hasier Hernandez Aguirre Sarobe, who is a postdoctoral researcher in history at the University of the Basque Country. He's a member of the Department of Contemporary History at this university and is based in the Netherlands as part of a postdoctoral stay at Leiden University. His main research interests include the emergence and reproduction of national identities, comparative study history of mentalities, and the interconnection between historical narratives and nationalism. He has studied these topics on a global scale, as for example, his book, Nation and the Writing of History in China and Britain, 1880-1930, as well as from a diachronical perspective, as is in his forthcoming book, Basque Inventing an Identity. And in addition, he's one of the authors of the investigation on the history of the Basque cuisine, which is, of course, part of the culture, led by Professor Luger Mies, contributor to the Elgar Encyclopedia of Nationalism, and he coordinates alongside Professor Eric Storm the Leiden University Nationalism Network. So he will talk about cultural and linguistic identity in the Basque country, autonomous within the Spanish state, Kingdom of Spain, with a long history, which has had, of course, periods of conflict and violence, and now we can consider this as the success story in autonomy, although it's an ongoing process. So we look forward to hearing from you. Over to you now.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. My voice is a bit hoarse, so I hope you can hear me well. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Finot for inviting me and everyone involved in the organization of this seminar for having me here today. I would like to share my screen, if possible, for my presentation. So let's see if you can all see it. Let's hope so. There you go. I hope you can see it. So, as Mr. Finot has mentioned, I'm a historian, so I'm no political scientist, no social scientist. So I've opted for trying to see how this process of linguistic policies in the Basque Country has occurred from a historical approach rather than from a more like contemporary way of looking at things. So, and in this presentation, I will first offer an overview of the framing and goals of my analysis, and then I will study the relationship between Euskera, that is the Basque language, and Basque identity throughout history. Through this analysis, I will reach the moment of the Statute of Autonomy in 1979 and its linguistic policy, and then I will conclude by showing what this case might have in store for the Moroccan initiative for Western Sahara. So, in this regard, the goals of this study are a critical assessment of the evolution of linguistic policies in the Basque autonomous community, and also how these relate to the initiative proposed by the Kingdom of Morocco for the Sahara region. For those who might not know, the land of the Basques, the lands of the Basques, that is the places where Euskera, this Basque language, is spoken, are traditionally recognized as 7 provinces, 3 of which fall on the French side of the border, whereas 4 are on the Spanish side. And the Basque autonomous community only encompasses 3 of those southern provinces, those of Vizcaya, Gipuzkoa, and Álava. I have opted for focusing on Euskera rather than other cultural expressions. First of all, because Euskera is largely considered to be the most important symbol of Basque identity nowadays. It has an emotional and political role in Basque society that is unparalleled by any other cultural expression, and also because this importance has been recognized by public authorities who have tried to preserve it and also promote it in the public and the private spheres. So this was not the case throughout history, and here I will try to provide a brief overview of the relationship between this language and the ways in which Basque identity has traditionally been framed throughout the times. If we look at the earliest sources in antiquity and the early Middle Ages, what is clear is that neither the Romans nor any successor powers, the Visigoths, the Franks, the Muslim, paid any attention to the language of the land, even though Basque nationalists tried to framed the Kingdom of Pamplona, which would later become the Kingdom of Navarre, as a kind of Basque proto-state. Our available sources point out to the fact that rulers of this kingdom had no linguistic association with Basque-speaking inhabitants, and rather conducted their affairs in Latin or other Romance languages. And during the late Middle Ages, this ignorance kind of was transformed due to the definitive incorporation of Basque territories to the respective crowns of France and Spain over the course of the 14th and 15th centuries. And this manifested in a process better known in historiography as the War of Bandos, which took place from the 14th to the 16th centuries, and which was a moment of overarching instability produced by local chieftains who tried to construct lordships in the region, chartered towns, which introduced Castilian and French legal, linguistic, and political practices to a Basque-speaking and Basque traditionalist region, and also because due to the impact of the Black Death and the surge of iron production, peasants and artisans were very conflictive in this period. So what resulted from this overarching instability was a system in the early modern period known as the provincial system. The provincial system, though it varied in each of these territories, Vizcaya, Guipúzcoa, and Álava, had overall three main objectives. The first and foremost was that provincial institutions should play the only representative role for the entire community of inhabitants, rather than lords or cities. Then these assemblies would try to gain preferent access to the new opportunities opened by the imperial expansion, especially in the case of Spain, of course, against the background of the discovery of America. And then, finally, and most importantly for Euskera, it tried to prevent commoners for threatening the rule of the established elite in these provincial systems. So this would have catastrophic consequences for the development of Euskera, because if a person wanted to have any kind of political post, if he or she wanted to take part in large-scale business, they would have to do so in Spanish rather than in Basque. So it was forbidden by laws. So this was the state of affairs up until the late 18th and early 19th centuries. On the French side of the border, the moment of the French Revolution, of course, brought the elimination of this provincial system and the integration of its inhabitants to the French nation. On the other side, on the Spanish side, the process of elimination of the provincial system would last longer up until the late 19th century, and it would be carried out against a backdrop of large-scale industrialization around the city of Bilbao, which brought lots of migrants from the rest of Spain to the city. And of course, it also meant the loss of many speakers and many territories to Euskera in these parts. It was in this moment, in the late 19th century, that this man, Sabino Arana, created the movement that would ultimately become the Basque nationalist movement. However, for the ideas of Basque nation that Sabino Arana espoused, these were premised on a racial conception of what Basque was. It wanted to create an independent Basque state, which was a mirror of the provincial system, but with all connections previously that previously had existed to the Spanish government severed. And also, he saw this functional diglossia that had over the centuries been created between Euskera and the Spanish and French languages as a helpful force for preventing the pollution of true-born Basques. So this was the state of affairs by the early 20th century. This century, the 20th century, was the first one in which Euskera was recognized as an official language. This happened in the first Statute of Autonomy, which was approved in 1936 by the Second Spanish Republic. However, it was a very short-lived one. It lasted for only some months due to the eruption of the Spanish Civil War. After Francisco Franco's dictatorship was established after the war, these Basque nationalist projects, such as the statute, were labeled as treacherous. So any public development of the language was associated to the movement and was therefore censored. This was pretty much the state of the game for most of the 20th century, although the decades from the 1960s to the 1970s saw a surge in the public representation of Euskera, especially from left-wing societies, artists, and writers who promoted the idea of Euskera as a sort of language of resistance, a language of liberty against the censorship established by the dictatorship. This, of course, also took place against, as Mr. Finot has mentioned, an overarching environment of violence by the military and terrorist group ETA. So when this happened, when Francisco Franco passed away in 1979, and democracy was established in Spain, the Statute of Autonomy of the Basque community was approved, and it was at this moment that, for the first time, truly, Euskera gained some kind of official recognition, even though its history, of course, was very much longer. So right now I will try to study what the opportunities of this statute approved in 1979 were in regards to linguistic policy. So there were three potential approaches to the linguistic policy that the drafters of the Statute of Autonomy could have taken with regards to the Basque community. It's important to understand, first off, that by the moment of 1979, only 20% of the inhabitants of the Basque autonomous community were fluent in Euskera. So this was, of course, a consequence of both the massive migration that had been happening ever since the 19th century, but also to the linguistic policies of Francisco Franco's dictatorship. So potential approaches were, first off, to consider these Basque speakers a linguistic minority with some amount of protection. Second, to declare Euskera co-official only in those areas where the language was still widely spoken, which included only a part of the province of Guipúzcoa, but not, of course, the major cities. Or a third option, which was to make Euskera an equal in status to Spanish all across the Basque autonomous community, regardless of the existing linguistic composition of its inhabitants. So this, of course, was the path of greatest resistance, because it was a kind of enforcement of the minority language to the larger part of the population. It was one aimed at rescuing the language from decline and to enable its social growth. So this path was manifest in the text of the statute itself, where the text declares that Euskera, the native language of the Basque people, will have like Spanish, the status of an official language in the Basque country, and all its inhabitants have the right to know and use both languages. And also, second provision, the common institutions of the autonomous community, taking into account the social linguistic diversity of the Basque country, shall guarantee the use of both languages by regulating their official status, and shall establish and regulate the necessary measures and means to ensure their knowledge. There involved the words shall guarantee and the necessary measures and means. I have emboldened them because I think they are crucial to understanding the approach that this facilitation of Euskera was carried out. First, it required a public administration that was fluent in the Basque, which of course meant teaching and learning by lots of people along in their career, and also it meant the establishment of Euskera as the instruction language in the education system in the Basque autonomous community. So rather than focusing on the measures taken, I will show some of the consequences that this linguistic policy had over time. We can trace them very well thanks to social linguistic surveys carried out every 5 years in all the territories of Euskera, not only in the Basque Autonomous Community, but also in Navarre and in the northern Basque Country. And this is very, very interesting for our interest, because in Navarre and the northern Basque Country, Euskera is not recognized as an official language. So what we can see is that the evolution of Basque speakers by territory shows in the Basque Autonomous Community a surge in speakers, whereas in the rest of the territories, ever since 1991 to 2021, the moment of the last social linguistic survey, these proportions have either increased only in a small proportion, or they had actually decreased. So also in the graph on the right, we can see how the number of passive speakers, the proportion of passive Basque speakers, is also much higher in the Basque Autonomous Community than it is on the other two areas. The evolution of Basque speakers by age too shows a very large shift between 1991 and 2021, whereas in 1991, the proportion of those speaking Euskera tended towards the elderly. By 2021, and thanks mostly by the education system, it is now the youngest people that know more Euskera than the elderly. It is also noteworthy the evolution that the attitudes towards Basque language promotion in the Basque Country had undertaken in this same period. So we can see how in 1991, almost half of the population of the Basque Autonomous Community was in favor of this kind of language promotion, whereas the proportion has also elevated in these 30 years. And once again, a territorial comparison of these wider trends shows how the largest part of this positive attitude is takes place in the Basque Autonomous Community and not in Navarre or in the northern Basque Country, where positions are more ambivalent. So what does this tell us about the Moroccan initiative? How can we compare the Moroccan initiative for Western Sahara to this project of the Basque Country? Well, first off, I would like to begin by, kind of compiling what the initiative says about linguistic protection. So we have Article 5 of the initiative, in which it mentions the Sahara populations will have the financial resources needed for the region's development in all fields and will take an active part in the nation's economic, social, and cultural life. And more explicitly, the Article 12, among the list of elements that the government would have some functions upon, it says, well, this autonomous government will exercise powers mainly over the following: in the social sector, housing, and specifically education. And finally, also in Article 12, it will exercise powers also over cultural affairs, including promotion of the Saharan Hassani cultural heritage. So these provisions are in line with others included in the 2011 Constitution of the Kingdom of Morocco, such as Article 5 of this text, in which it mentions that the state works for the preservation of Hassaniya as an integral component of Moroccan cultural identity, as well as the protection of its speakers and of the cultural expression of Morocco. So I think those words, preservation, protection, cultural heritage, are important for understanding more or less my interpretation of what the initiative is saying in regards to linguistic policy. So this would be my tentative reading of the linguistic policy of the initiative. So if we consider the three options that Basque drafters of the statute had in 1979 when they wrote the text, and we could title them provisionally preservation, revitalization, and expansion, it seems to me, and this is of course a very tentative reading, and of course I understand that the initiative is more a framework rather than a very detailed proposal, that the initiative falls upon the first category, the category of preservation. This is because, first, it offers a very limited normative space for revitalization. So a combined reading of the text of the initiative and the constitutional text of the Kingdom of Morocco appears to leave little room for proactive revitalization in the Basque model, following the Basque model. Of course, there's no mention of any officialization or of Hassaniya dialect, and although there's a vague mention to the powers that the government would have with regards to education, these are not explicit, and it is not clear the degree to which this autonomous community could lead an active, a proactive linguistic policy to revitalize their dialect. So, as provisional conclusions, the lessons that we could learn from the Basque case are first and foremost that it is possible to recover and even expand a minority language in the modern world. This was a very discussed question, and results over the years seem to point to this reality. The drafters of the Statute of 1979 sought a bilingual society, which was, of course, never before carried out in the Basque territories. So this meant imposing the language of the minority to the majority of the population of the Basque autonomous community. So how were they able to do so? They were able to choose this option because there was a continuous tide of popular support. This continuous tide of popular support emerged in the late years of Franco's dictatorship, and it then continued thanks to the successes of the linguistic model as premised by the autonomous institutions. And finally, the Basque case demonstrates that the education system is a crucial element in the process of modernization and expansion of a language. So the evolution of speakers of Euskera by age shows how the proportions are massively altered thanks to making Euskera the language of instruction in the Basque autonomous community. So how can this relate to the initiative? Well, the initiative itself appears to espouse, and of course this is a tentative reading, appears to espouse a functional diglossia in any Saharan autonomous region in which the language of this state of Morocco would remain the dominant ones in the public sphere, whereas Hassaniya would be regarded as a heritage and reserved for private spheres. It does not directly reject the introduction of the Hassaniya dialect into the education system, but once again, the vagueness of the proposal appears to compound the image of this diglossia I was talking about. The introduction of Hassaniya to education, in case this would be a goal of the institutions, would require the collaboration of both internal and external factors. Internally, it would most likely require the standardization and the officiality of the language, and externally, in regards to the larger state of Morocco, it would require support, a concerted support for allowing the autonomous government to carry out its linguistic policies. And although these linguistic policies will require this support, as in the Basque case, it is not clear if this grassroots support exists as it existed in the late 1960s and 1970s in the Basque case. So more research should be conducted in this regard, and this is a crucial element for a model based on the Basque model to take place. So this would be my grain of sand for this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Zia, it's been illuminating. Again,
Okay.
most people have very limited knowledge about the Basque language, about history, about culture. But I think it can be mentioned as one of the rare cases where, of course, language, as you said, is a very important part of identity. And despite all the history of confrontation or, between a dominant language and a minority language, some balance has been found in the autonomous system status. And again, I think that there are a lot to learn from other autonomous regions, including for the Sahara region. In your comparison, you rightly pointed out that the two key elements of successful solution to promote this cultural linguistic identity is first guarantees, legal status, and in the case of Sahara, as you rightly pointed out, the Hassaniya language is recognized in the constitution, which is a very strong point of departure on which, of course, more can be built. And the second key aspect, of course, is resources, linguistic policies, particularly in education. And you're right to point out that at this stage, the framework agreement looks more like preservation and protection, but it doesn't exclude revitalization and active linguistic policy, because that would be up to the autonomous region itself, the authorities of that region, because they have the exclusive competence over education, and they have a guarantee of resources from their own tax system and also support and assistance from central government, that they will be built on this point of departure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, we'll be happy to publish your article, because as I said, it's a very important case study. Of course, you mentioned that initially the historical peculiarity to have a country or nation or people, which is shared by two states across the border. And of course, I know more the French side because my daughter lives in Biarritz, and so I've discovered a lot about the French Basque Country. But one thing is sure is that the autonomous system is much more advanced on the Spanish side, while the French, as we will hear now more about Corsica, are, I would say, less advanced, less keen on granting regions a more autonomous status. So thank you very much. And now I will switch to French. So up to you to decide the language you want to listen to. Nous allons maintenant parler du statut de la Corse et de la langue corse avec Dr Dominique Verdoni, qui est présidente du Conseil académique restreint de l'Université de Corse depuis mai 2020. Elle est professeure des universités depuis 2006 et elle est directrice adjointe du laboratoire Lieux, Identité, e-Space et Activités du Centre national de recherche scientifique de l'Université de Corse. Elle a été responsable du projet de recherche Identité, Culture, processus de patrimonialisation, à l'origine notamment de la médiathèque culturelle de la Corse et des Corses, dont elle a assuré la responsabilité scientifique. Elle a été aussi directrice de la faculté des lettres, de langue, des arts, des sciences humaines et sociales de 2003 à 2008. Elle est chargée de mission pour l'intégration de l'Institut universitaire de formation des maîtres de Corse à l'Université de Corse en 2018. Elle a participé à la création de l'École supérieure du professorat et de l'éducation de Corse, devenue Institut national supérieur de professorat et de l'éducation, dont elle a été directrice de 2014 à 2020. Et elle est aujourd'hui responsable pédagogique des parcours liés aux Corses, de la filière langue, littérature des civilisations étrangères et régionales et responsable pédagogique du grand plan de formation en langue corse qu'elle a élaboré avec le rectorat de Corse pour la période 2016-2022. Donc, je vais vous donner la parole, Madame Verdoni, euh, sachant que vous n'avez pas eu le temps d'aborder directement et de comparer avec l'initiative marocaine pour le Sahara, mais comme vous en êtes d'accord, je vous poserai quelques questions à la fin de votre exposé pour faire justement ce lien, cette comparaison avec les deux statuts. Donc, je vous donne la parole avec plaisir. Merci.
Merci. Bonjour à tous. Tout d'abord, merci au nom de l'Université de Corse et merci bien sûr en mon nom propre à Monsieur Finot et puis aussi à l'ensemble des participants et organisateurs pour cette invitation. Alors, la langue et la culture corse, j'ai essayé de tracer rapidement ces enjeux et puis les défis qui attendent encore cette langue et cette culture corse. D'abord, préciser qu'il s'agit d'un processus revendicatif qui s'est établi également sur le plan social. En effet, des domaines de pratique comme l'enseignement, les médias, l'administration, la littérature, qui sont autant de lieux d'exercice d'une langue officielle, dite institutionnalisée, constituent pour une langue minoritaire, en tout cas en ce qui concerne le corse, plutôt pour une langue en situation de minoration, s'il fallait être exact, à la fois un espace de valorisation sociale à investir et un espace de reconnaissance à conquérir. Ainsi, les conflits éclatent-ils quand les demandes sociales, politiques ou culturelles ne peuvent être gérées par les mécanismes institutionnels qui, cherchant à les minorer et à les marginaliser, augmentent leurs charges subversives et leurs charges, bien entendu, émotionnelles. Ces types de conflits signent tous l'émergence d'une société civile contestant la logique d'intégration, voire d'exclusion d'un État républicain, dont les décisions ont pour effet de cristalliser des identités dans des secteurs où, jusqu'à présent, les acteurs sociaux n'existaient pas forcément. Leur force de mobilisation dépend alors de la capacité des militants associatifs, on pourrait ici utiliser le terme de communauté de lutte, à fabriquer de l'acteur social. Pour pallier leur faible capacité de pression, puisqu'il s'agit de marginaux, de minorés, et leur manque de ressources, ils cherchent à capitaliser davantage l'émotion. Nostalgie, symptômes de perte d'identité, sentiment de dépossession, désir d'expression, violence, volonté de vivre dignement, pour toucher l'opinion publique. La médiatisation joue alors un grand rôle, mais aussi toutes les formes d'expression artistique, chant, théâtre, littérature, cinéma. Une fois ce capital mobilisé, il se traduit donc par l'émergence de deux thèmes qui traversent l'ensemble du champ de la conflictualité, le statut et l'identité. Ils témoignent de la double volonté de participer directement au processus de décision et d'une exigence de reconnaissance. Ces deux désirs ou ces deux volontés populaires sont parfois contradictoires, parfois complémentaires, mais dans tous les cas, ces désirs donnent naissance au projet d'éducation, au projet de société, de formation, d'économie, au projet de reconnaissance politique et institutionnelle. Toutefois, si considérer un fait linguistique, historique, ethnique peut être constitutif d'un état de différence, seule la représentation de ce fait, processus producteur de sens, constitue un signe d'identité. Comme par ailleurs, seule la reconnaissance en fonde le statut, c'est-à-dire le droit à l'expression et à la diffusion de cette différence culturelle. Face donc à la diffusion des cultures légitimes, organisées, normalisées par les institutions et les médias, il est frappant de constater que d'emblée, les termes de langue et culture régionale, c'est ainsi que elles sont désignées en France, désignent une ambiguïté, à moins que ce ne soit une exiguïté, inhérente au savoir non institué auquel on refuse le label de civilisation, accordé par exemple aux langues étrangères. Ainsi enseigne-t-on en France la langue et la civilisation anglaise aux uns et la langue et la culture régionale aux autres. Serait-ce le signe d'une hiérarchisation des savoirs, saut indélébile imprimé par un 19e siècle évolutionniste et diffusionniste à nos représentations mentales de la culture? Serait-ce le signe aussi d'une hiérarchisation des langues, nationales, régionales, stigmate d'un État-nation monoculturel face aux expressions culturelles de la diversité? en tirant le fil rouge de la revendication sur la langue en Corse. C'est tout un système qui peu à peu se démaille. Si on y ajoute les revendications sur les moyens de diffusion et de communication nécessaires à la connaissance et à l'épanouissement d'une culture, alors apparaît le véritable enjeu. Demander à l'État français des outils de formation afin de redonner à la langue et à la culture corse non seulement sa valeur patrimoniale, mais surtout son pouvoir d'action et de création. En même temps qu'apparaît la nécessité de procéder de façon plus complète à l'inventaire et à la mise en valeur du patrimoine, non seulement écologique, mais aussi et surtout social, c'est-à-dire linguistique, littéraire, archéologique, historique, ethnologique, est également formulée la demande d'accès à toutes les sources d'information, livres, textes, hypertextes, médias, multimédia, banques de données, et ce dans une activité créative, c'est-à-dire non seulement recevoir, mais produire et diffuser. C'est là qu'interviennent les politiques d'incitation et de promotion pour aider financièrement et techniquement à l'élaboration d'outils innovants, mais aussi et surtout pour aider à la diffusion de ces outils, pour les distribuer dans tous les lieux de promotion de la culture, écoles à tous les degrés, bibliothèques, médiathèques, centres culturels, associations de quartier, médias, réseaux sociaux. Deuxième aspect, la langue corse, les différentes étapes de sa difficile reconnaissance. Exclue de la loi d'Exxon de 1951 à 1974, la langue corse, considérée alors comme appartenant à une aire linguistique étrangère, italienne, ne bénéficiera pas de cette possibilité d'enseignement de 3 heures par semaine jusqu'en 1982, c'est-à-dire jusqu'à l'application de la circulaire dite Savary. Bien que considérée par l'État français comme un laboratoire politique, en témoignent les 3 grandes lois que la Corse a connues, celles de 82, de 91 et de 2002, et qui lui sont absolument spécifiques, l'offre et la généralisation de l'enseignement demeurent des objectifs difficiles à atteindre. Ils avaient pourtant été fixés lors de la venue du ministre de l'Éducation nationale, Lionel Jospin, en 1988. Par rapport à d'autres situations de minoration linguistique, l'enseignement du corse se développe de façon originale, y compris en France, dans un modèle complexe et tolérant. En effet, il ne considère pas que le conflit, comme dans la situation par exemple du catalan, objectif substituer le catalan au castillan, ne peut se résoudre que par un retour au monolinguisme, si tant est que ces situations aient vraiment existé un jour en Corse, qui a souvent connu des situations de plurilinguisme, voire de bilinguisme, latin, toscan, ligure. L'enseignement du corse repose donc sur une gestion aujourd'hui du plurilinguisme, corse-français, plus d'autres langues, issues notamment des communautés présentes en Corse, qui sont nombreuses et qui sont issues de l'immigration de peuplement. Si l'établissement d'une norme dans l'enseignement est acquis, à la différence de la plupart des langues moins répandues, catalan, basque, breton, occitan, qui ont établi un standard à partir d'une variété choisie, le corse a opté pour un respect des variétés qui le composent et ce qu'on appelle une pratique polynomique. Il a fait le choix également de l'éducation nationale, donc du service public, comme lieu principal de son enseignement, dans un objectif de généralisation de l'accès à tous et comme facteur d'innovation, dans un système éducatif jugé comme trop ethnocentré. Par la généralisation, chacun, quelle que soit son origine, peut participer au projet d'une langue non pas unique mais commune, sans discrimination. Depuis quelques années néanmoins, face aux difficultés de mise en œuvre sur le plan académique, un enseignement privé se développe, notamment sur le modèle immersif. Troisième aspect, le rappel des avancées juridiques successives relatives à la situation du corse. Face à la demande relative à la langue corse, la position de l'État inscrite dans la Constitution du 4 octobre 1958, en sa version actuellement en vigueur, qui dispose à l'article 2 que la langue de la République est le français, témoigne d'une hostilité de principe à toute reconnaissance réelle du statut de la langue corse, même si sous l'effet de rapports de force, dans la seconde partie du XXe siècle, elle présente quelques fléchissements par notamment une reconnaissance, au moins à minima, de la valeur patrimoniale des langues minoritaires, dites régionales, puis dites aujourd'hui langue de France, si on se réfère à la création de l'agrégation des langues de France en 2018. D'ailleurs, l'application de la loi d'Exon à la langue corse, donc intervenue en 1974, se heurte très vite à la protection absolue de l'usage du français en vertu de la loi numéro 94-665 du 4 août 1994 relative à l'emploi de la langue française, dite loi Toubon. Dès l'article 1, il est de nouveau signifié que la langue de la République en vertu de la Constitution est la langue française et c'est un élément fondamental de la personnalité du patrimoine de la France. L'article 2 précise par ailleurs que dans la désignation, l'offre, la présentation, le mode d'emploi ou d'utilisation, la description de l'étendue et des conditions de garantie d'un bien, d'un produit ou d'un service, ainsi que dans les factures et quittances, l'emploi de la langue française est obligatoire. Les mêmes dispositions s'appliquent à toute publicité, écrite, parlée ou audiovisuelle. Toute inscription ou annonce apposée ou faite sur voie publique, dans un lieu ouvert au public ou dans un moyen de transport en commun et destinée à l'information du public doit être formulée en langue française. C'est ce que dit l'article 3. Il en va ainsi dans chaque acte officiel de la vie courante, détaillé donc dans le corps de la loi. Encore sur le plan universitaire, suite à la réouverture de l'Université de Corse en 1981, donc fermée après la conquête française au XVIIIe siècle en juin 1769, est créé en 1982 le premier diplôme de premier cycle, le DUC d'études régionales en France, suivi d'un cursus universitaire complet, donc jusqu'à la thèse de doctorat. En 1991, ouverture du concours de recrutement des enseignants du second degré pour les collèges et les lycées, par la création du CAPES de Corse, monovalent, alors que les autres CAPES de langue régionale en France sont bivalents, c'est-à-dire par exemple pour les Bretons, on enseigne le breton et une autre discipline. Puis d'un concours spécifique pour les futurs enseignants bilingues du premier degré, donc dans les écoles maternelles et élémentaires, pour les élèves de 3 à 10 ans, en 2001. Et enfin, une agrégation des langues de France, donc option Corse en 2018. Si à chaque étape importante de l'évolution statutaire de l'île, le corse, la langue, a fait l'objet de développement, pour autant, il ne lui a pas été conféré jusqu'à aujourd'hui de statut juridique. La loi donc, du 13 mai 1991 portant statut de la collectivité territoriale de Corse a ainsi prévu en la matière que l'Assemblée adopte un plan de développement de l'Assemblée de la langue et de la culture, de l'enseignement de la langue et de la culture corse, prévoyant notamment les modalités d'insertion de cet enseignement dans le temps scolaire. La loi du 22 janvier 2022 relative à la Corse a complété ces dispositions. Il est inséré dans la section 4 du chapitre 2 du premier livre du livre 3. Donc la langue corse est une matière enseignée dans le cadre de l'horaire normal des écoles maternelles et élémentaires de Corse. Le deuxième alinéa précise aussi l'Assemblée adopte, donc l'Assemblée de Corse, dans les mêmes conditions, un plan de développement de l'enseignement de la langue et de la culture corse, dont les modalités d'appréciation et d'application font l'objet d'une convention conclue entre la collectivité territoriale de Corse et l'État. Cette convention prévoit les mesures d'accompagnement nécessaires et notamment celles relatives à la formation initiale et à la formation continue des enseignants. La collectivité territoriale de Corse, après consultation du Conseil économique, social et culturel de la Corse, conclut avec les sociétés publiques du secteur audiovisuel qui ont des établissements en Corse des conventions particulières en vue de promouvoir la réalisation de programmes de télévision et de radiodiffusion ayant pour objet le développement de la langue et de la culture corse et destinés à être diffusés sur le territoire de la Corse. Pourtant, si le nouveau règlement intérieur de l'Assemblée de Corse entériné par délibération en date du 16 décembre 2021, comme celui du Conseil exécutif de Corse adopté le 8 février 2022, indique que les langues des débats sont le corse et le français, dans le cadre donc de l'exercice de contrôle de légalité exercé par le préfet de Corse, alors en fonction, bien ce préfet a dans une lettre d'observation en date du 10 février 2022 jugé irrecevable l'usage de la langue corse, mais également la notion de peuple corse, indiquant que les deux dispositions étaient contraires à la Constitution. Le recours exigeait donc que le règlement soit révisé. Je vous passe les péripéties, on va dire, des différents tribunaux. Aujourd'hui, en tout cas, l'affaire, on va dire, est encore instruite par le Conseil d'État, puis aujourd'hui portée par l'Assemblée de Corse devant la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme, donc procédure en cours. Enfin, les fondements de la reconnaissance concernant la langue et la culture corse. Nous souhaitons reprendre ici les principales analyses et propositions que nous avions faites en matière de glottopolitique et qui ont été développées dès 2011 dans le rapport qui a été remis à sa demande au ministère de l'Intérieur français, donc qui a été remis par l'Université de Corse, qui était une mission universitaire qui avait été mandatée par le ministre de l'Intérieur de l'époque, donc qui portait sur la réflexion stratégique pour fonder le droit à l'avenir de la Corse. Donc, il était dans cette mission stratégique fait état dans son rapport de la nécessité de l'instauration d'un cadre de co-officialité et nous avions également abordé la question de la citoyenneté culturelle. À ce titre, dans le rapport sur l'évolution institutionnelle de la Corse, remis le 11 novembre 2021 et réalisé par la professeure Vanda Mastor, agrégée des facultés de droit, donc professeure de droit public à l'université de Toulouse-Capitole à l'époque, aujourd'hui professeure à l'université de Corse. Elle a donc remis également dans son rapport du conseil exécutif de la collectivité de Corse, donc un rapport sur justement le statut de la Corse qu'il faudrait améliorer. Et elle fait des analyses sur le droit comparé et apporte en cette matière la preuve irréfutable de l'absence d'incompatibilité entre le caractère indivisible, voire unitaire d'une république et la reconnaissance des langues régionales en son sein. Un tour d'horizon des textes des constitutions européennes et des décisions des cours constitutionnelles permet de mettre en évidence plusieurs éléments significatifs. Le droit comparé nous enseigne que juridiquement, la question des langues s'appréhende à travers deux prismes. Premièrement, celui de la forme de l'État. Le lien entre l'unité de l'État et unilinguisme est aussi évident que celui entre État composé et multilinguisme, entre État composé par exemple régional ou fédéral. Deuxièmement, celui des droits des locuteurs. Selon cette acception, les langues régionales sont traditionnellement associées de manière négative au principe de non-discrimination, de manière positive aux droits linguistiques dont les locuteurs seraient les bénéficiaires. Donc, pour l'instant, il est à regretter que l'absence de planification linguistique partagée entre l'État et la collectivité de Corse et l'insuffisance des plans de formation des personnels de l'éducation nationale recrutés par l'État, justement, n'ait pas permis, si ce n'est une reconnaissance de co-officialité, au moins, justement, un accès à ces droits, on va dire, en matière de citoyenneté culturelle. En effet, dans le statut de la Corse, l'État, en janvier 2002, n'a pas transféré toutes les compétences à la collectivité de Corse en matière d'éducation, même si la collectivité, dans le cadre de ses compétences élargies, a pouvoir de proposer un plan pour la langue corse, mais sans pour autant lui accorder de statut. La loi du 22 janvier 2002 relative à la Corse prévoit que la langue corse est une matière enseignée, donc dans le cadre de l'horaire normal des écoles maternelles et élémentaires de Corse. Cet article ne précise pas les modalités d'insertion de cet enseignement de la langue corse dans le second degré, donc pas pour les collèges et les lycées. Dans sa décision du 17 janvier 2002, le Conseil constitutionnel rappelle cependant que cet enseignement ne saurait revêtir un caractère obligatoire ni pour les élèves ni pour les enseignants et juge cette disposition conforme à la Constitution sous réserve que l'enseignement de la langue corse revête tant dans son principe que dans ses modalités de mise en œuvre un caractère facultatif. La politique linguistique de la collectivité est donc soumise à autorisation du gouvernement de l'État. Pour le moment, la langue et la culture corse bénéficient d'actions de préservation, de valorisation, mais à titre plutôt patrimonial. Depuis 2008, le constituant a choisi de reconnaître les langues régionales, donc dans différents articles de loi, et notamment dans un nouvel article 75-1, donc qui serait dédié aux collectivités territoriales et qui disposerait que les langues régionales appartiennent au patrimoine de la France. Néanmoins, le Conseil constitutionnel juge en 2011 que cette reconnaissance n'institue pas un droit ou une liberté que la Constitution garantit. Donc, la loi du 21 mai 2021 relative à la protection patrimoniale des langues régionales et à leur promotion, dite loi MOLAC, apporte des mesures supplémentaires de protection et de promotion des langues régionales, notamment dans les domaines de l'enseignement et des services publics, mais le Conseil constitutionnel en censure deux dispositions, considérant qu'elles sont contraires à l'article 2 de la Constitution. L'enseignement immersif des langues régionales, qui consiste à utiliser la langue régionale comme langue principale d'enseignement et comme langue de communication au sein de l'établissement. et l'usage des signes diacritiques dans les actes de l'état civil qui reconnaissent aux particuliers un droit à l'usage d'une langue autre que le français dans leurs relations avec les administrations et les services publics. Enfin, la langue corse est également utilisée dans la sphère médiatique. Bon, certains programmes sont proposés en langue corse, notamment dans les antennes régionales de France 3 ou dans les antennes régionales de Radio France, donc au niveau local. Pour conclure, le pouvoir de proposition d'adaptation des normes confiées à la collectivité de Corse coexiste actuellement avec le cadre constitutionnel de droit commun, portant sur la possibilité de mettre en œuvre des expérimentations. Ces procédures conçues comme des réponses à la demande de différenciation territoriale présentent plusieurs limites. Par conséquent, la Corse fait l'objet aujourd'hui encore d'une demande de réouverture d'un processus d'autonomie appelé processus de Beauvau, tant sur le plan institutionnel, son statut n'est pas encore abouti et n'a pas encore donné satisfaction. Un projet d'écriture constitutionnelle est donc en cours, notamment après les événements de 2022. Les mobilisations de ce printemps 2022 ont souligné l'expression de revendications politiques portées notamment par une grande partie de la jeunesse corse et relayées par les représentants élus de la collectivité, exprimant la résurgence du mouvement nationaliste corse. Plus largement, nombre de manifestants revendiquaient alors et revendiquent encore la reconnaissance du peuple corse via l'autonomie ou l'indépendance de l'île, un statut de co-officialité pour la langue corse, seulement considéré sur le plan régional aujourd'hui, la généralisation d'un enseignement du biplurilinguisme et l'autorisation, autre qu'à titre expérimental, de pratiquer sur le plan pédagogique la méthode d'apprentissage immersif. En résumé, la Corse, attachée à la France par le traité de Versailles de 1768, a pendant plus de 2 siècles été administrée dans les mêmes conditions que les autres parties du territoire national. C'est la loi du 2 mars 1982 portant statut particulier de la région de Corse qui l'a dotée pour la première fois d'un statut distinct de celui des autres régions. Cette loi a donc été remplacée par celle de 1991, puis celle de 2022 relative à la Corse. Ces 3 lois ont été déférées à la censure du Conseil constitutionnel. La première a été déclarée non contraire à la Constitution, mais par décision en 91 et en 2002, le Conseil a déclaré non conforme à la Constitution plusieurs dispositions importantes des lois de 1991 et de 2002. Des 3 décisions du Conseil constitutionnel ressortent 2 idées essentielles. La Corse est une collectivité territoriale spécifique. La Corse est une partie intégrante de la République. S'appuyant sur les dispositions de l'article 72 de la Constitution, le Conseil constitutionnel a admis que la Corse peut être dotée d'un statut spécifique, mais que ce statut doit rester un statut de collectivité territoriale, conciliant le principe de libre administration des collectivités avec les prérogatives de l'État. La Corse, à ce jour, ne bénéficie donc toujours pas d'un statut d'autonomie, malgré les différents changements de statut qui, depuis 1981, se sont succédés. Elle reste une région qui, certes, déroge au droit commun, mais en étant seulement dotée d'un pouvoir d'adaptation. En Méditerranée, elle fait figure d'exception face à ses autres voisines insulaires, puisque vous le savez, la Sicile et la Sardaigne sont autonomes depuis 1948, Chypre est indépendante depuis 1959, Malte depuis 1964, les îles de Madère et des Açores sont autonomes depuis 1976 et les Baléares depuis 1983. Pour de plus amples informations, je vous recommande, et ce seront mes derniers mots, sur la situation de la Corse, de consulter le rapport d'information qui porte sur l'avenir institutionnel de la Corse, puisque comme vous le savez, je viens de le dire, un processus dit de Beauvau et donc de réouverture des négociations sur le statut de la Corse est encore en cours. Voilà, je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci, Madame Verdenier. C'est évidemment un cas encore très intéressant et particulier, spécifique, parce que, comme vous l'avez expliqué dans votre conclusion, des pays voisins comme l'Italie ou l'Espagne ou le Portugal ont accordé des statuts d'autonomie voire d'indépendance à des îles, à des régions, donc qui bénéficient d'un statut d'autonomie bien plus avancé que la France. La France est resté un État unitaire, mais qui progressivement a néanmoins reconnu certaines formes d'autonomie culturelle ou linguistique qui sont évidemment plus avancées dans les territoires d'outre-mer comme la Polynésie ou la Nouvelle-Calédonie. La Corse reste évidemment un cas spécifiques. Comme vous l'avez rappelé, il y a eu aussi une partie de conflictualité, de violence, de lutte pour faire reconnaître cette spécificité. Mais, et comme vous le rappelez aussi, il y a un processus en cours. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas bien la terminologie française, quand on parle de Beauvau, ça veut dire la place Beauvau à Paris, où est le siège du ministère de l'Intérieur. Donc ça donne bien une idée que ce processus de discussion, de négociation est piloté par l'État, mais en particulier par le ministère de l'Intérieur. Alors, vous n'avez évidemment pas évoqué directement l'initiative du Maroc pour l'autonomie du Sahara. Je vais me permettre juste de vous poser quelques questions pour comparer avec le statut de la Corse. Alors, l'initiative pour le Sahara prévoit que les populations du Sahara géreront elles-mêmes leurs affaires de manière démocratique par le biais d'organes législatifs, exécutifs et judiciaires jouissant de pouvoirs exclusifs. Elles disposeront de ressources financières nécessaires au développement de la région dans tous les domaines et participeront activement à la vie économique, sociale et culturelle de la nation. Comment donc le degré actuel d'autonomie de la Corse se compare-t-il par rapport à un tel statut?
Alors, pour ce qui est de la Corse, vraiment ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que nous avons un pouvoir d'adaptation. Voilà. Donc, ce n'est pas à proprement parler, en tout cas, un pouvoir législatif. Il n'y a pas de possibilité de voter les lois. L'Assemblée nationale vote les lois et l'Assemblée de Corse a le droit de dire cette loi n'est pas adaptée pour la Corse, nous demandons sa révision, nous demandons sa modification. Ce qui est un processus qui est très long, très compliqué et qui jusqu'à présent n'a pas donné dans sa mise en œuvre vraiment, on va dire, de résultats. Donc par rapport justement aux propositions qui sont faites pour le statut du Sahara, si effectivement il s'agit de pouvoir légiférer et ensuite, bien sûr, hein, que l'État donne son avis, c'est beaucoup plus, on va dire, opérationnel. Hein. C'est la région elle-même qui dira, par rapport à sa situation et par rapport à l'observation de cette situation, voilà comment effectivement on peut gérer cette situation et par quelle loi. Donc là, pour considérer la Corse, nous, on est bien en deçà, on n'a pas de pouvoir législatif et encore moins de pouvoir judiciaire. Bon, par ailleurs, le pouvoir judiciaire n'a jamais été demandé, on va dire, par la Corse. Hein, bien entendu, ça reste on va dire, un pouvoir régalien. Hein. En revanche, le pouvoir législatif est demandé aujourd'hui par la Corse et effectivement, je pense que c'est vers la capacité des assemblées à justement pouvoir dire quelles sont les lois qui permettent de gérer leur situation qui me semble la bonne voie. Voilà.
Merci. Alors, parmi les pouvoirs exclusifs que les populations du Sahara devraient exercer dans le cadre de leur statut d'autonomie figurent notamment l'éducation et les affaires culturelles, y compris la promotion du patrimoine culturel hassani du Sahara, lequel inclut le dialecte parlé par les populations autochtones. Pensez-vous qu'un tel statut et de telles compétences pour la culture et la langue corse seraient compatibles avec l'appartenance de la Corse à la République française?
Alors pour nous, c'est encore un peu très compliqué, puisque comme je vous l'ai dit dans l'article 2, la Constitution française précise que la langue de la République est le français, et pour l'instant c'est la seule langue, hein, bien entendu, ça ne concerne donc pas seulement le corse. Donc aujourd'hui, à mon sens, hein, à travers la réflexion que vous nous demandez de mener de façon comparée, ce qui me paraît très intéressant, c'est que les États puissent prendre conscience qu'il existe des différences culturelles, linguistiques, le fruit de l'histoire, bien entendu, et que la reconnaissance de ces situations linguistiques, culturelles, va permettre un enrichissement des compétences, on va dire, des citoyens, et non pas un processus de substitution d'un monolinguisme à un autre monolinguisme. Moi, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, la France est quand même en situation de sortir, on va dire, de cette conflictualité interne et d'admettre qu'à aucun moment, la demande de reconnaissance en la matière de la langue corse, mais on pourrait le dire des autres langues régionales, ne constitue un danger pour, on va dire, la langue française. À aucun moment on a demandé, effectivement, on est bien dans une demande d'exercer des doubles compétences, voire des triples compétences. Et je crois que tout locuteur doit pouvoir s'enrichir, effectivement, des langues qui sont et nationales, et internationales, et régionales, et accroître son patrimoine linguistique. En revanche, il faut que ces langues, une fois que ça c'est dit, soient à parité dans, en tout cas, le système de l'enseignement et le système de la formation. On l'a vu pour justement l'exemple du Pays basque. C'est cette mise à parité qui permet véritablement de s'engager dans une planification linguistique avec des objectifs. On veut former des locuteurs, pas seulement sauver des langues.
Merci. Alors, toujours un peu dans la même idée, au Maroc, les deux seules langues officielles sont l'arabe standard moderne et le berbère marocain standard, mais la langue régionale du Sahara, le hassania, est librement pratiquée dans la région, y compris à l'école et dans les médias, et la préservation du patrimoine culturel de la région est soutenue matériellement et financièrement par le gouvernement central. Pensez-vous qu'un tel système pourrait être applicable en Corse?
Alors, c'est un petit peu déjà le cas, hein, c'est-à-dire que oui, on est soutenu financièrement, on est soutenu aussi par des moyens, des dotations de ressources humaines, hein, il n'y a pas de souci là-dessus. Mais étant donné que le statut n'a pas avancé et que la Corse, comme le Conseil constitutionnel a rappelé, le Corse demeure facultatif, forcément, hein, il entre en compétition avec plein d'injonctions économiques, internationales qui font que, à un moment donné, les locuteurs sont obligés de faire des choix. Et malgré tous ces moyens qui sont donnés, hein, il n'est pas question de minimiser ces moyens. Sauf que, à un moment donné, quand c'est mis à profit d'une situation qui n'est pas au moins une situation de généralisation, si ce n'est d'obligation, forcément, on va dire, on n'a pas le résultat de ces moyens. Donc nous, on aimerait bien transformer ces moyens et ces ressources en résultats. Pour cela, il faut sortir du caractère seulement patrimonial et facultatif et se fixer des objectifs de planification linguistique.
Et puis, dernière question, le projet marocain prévoit que lorsqu'il sera adopté et confirmé par référendum, le statut d'autonomie de la région du Sahara sera institutionnalisé et inscrit dans la constitution du royaume, ce qui garantira sa pérennité. Pensez-vous que, compte tenu des réserves jusqu'ici exprimées par le gouvernement, le Parlement ou le Conseil constitutionnel français, une constitutionnalisation de l'autonomie de la Corse et la reconnaissance de la langue corse devrait être adoptée en France?
Alors, c'est bien l'objet du processus de Beauvau dont on parlait tout à l'heure, puisque effectivement, depuis 2022, c'est l'engagement de l'État d'inscrire dans la Constitution, ce qui serait la première fois, donc les demandes de la Corse en matière d'autonomie et notamment en matière de reconnaissance de langue corse. Reste encore la question de peuple, hein, et de communauté qui reste en débat. Donc, je pense qu'on a bien avancé sur quand même, on va dire, les principes, hein, parce qu'aujourd'hui, on sort un peu des postures idéologiques pour essayer de rendre les statuts opérationnels et gérer par la démocratie les conflits du passé. Donc, on est très, très en attente des résultats de ce processus de Beauvau. Néanmoins, il faudra convoquer le Congrès et y obtenir, hein, la majorité des 2 tiers. Donc, ce qui n'est pas rien non plus. Il faudra convaincre aussi de notre côté. On voit bien du côté de l'État en Corse que du côté aussi bien du représentant, le préfet ou le recteur, que la situation quand même se détend un petit peu, puisque le recteur s'est prononcé pour la généralisation du Corse, s'est prononcé pour des expérimentations pratiquement généralisées aussi de la méthode immersive. Donc on sent bien que des principes et des postures qui jusqu'à présent étaient un petit peu conflictuelles sont en train d'évoluer. Je pense qu'on est rentré dans un processus qui a pour volonté de rendre opérationnelle la loi. Donc, on a beaucoup d'espoir aujourd'hui concernant le processus de Beauvau. Et on espère effectivement que l'inscription dans la Constitution pourra effectivement résoudre au moins une partie, on va dire, des problèmes qui sont ceux de la Corse aujourd'hui, notamment par la loi, hein, bien entendu.
Très bien. Ben, écoutez, je vous remercie infiniment. Encore une fois, cette description, analyse du statut de la Corse et de la langue corse va enrichir un peu notre acquis de recherche que nous menons depuis plusieurs années pour comparer les différents systèmes et statuts d'autonomie et notamment pour enrichir le processus de négociation de l'autonomie du Sahara proposé par le Maroc. Encore une fois, merci.
C'est moi qui vous
Et
remercie.
nous allons passer maintenant à l'étude d'un autre cas. Je vais de nouveau basculer vers l'anglais. And now we're going to move to our last case study, the case study of Aruba. And unfortunately, we failed to find an available academic who could cover this case of Aruba from that region, from that country. So I volunteered to do this research. So bear with me, I'm not an expert on Aruba or the Caribbean islands in general, but I found some interesting information that can be useful for our exercise of comparing different statutes of autonomy with the Moroccan initiative for the Sahara region. So if you bear with me, I will share my screen. So we'll talk about linguistic and cultural identity of Aruba, which is part of the Netherlands. So it's a small Caribbean island located north of the coast of Venezuela, and it became in 1986 a constituent country of the Netherlands, together with the Netherlands itself and two other Caribbean islands, Curacao and Saint Martin. So the Netherlands is a country made of 4 countries, if you like, which includes Aruba. So it's a fairly small territory, I would say a bit larger than Macau that we looked at, and a population of 125,000 people, so fairly small population, which have the Dutch citizenship being part of the Netherlands, but also are a group characterized by its ethnic, linguistic, cultural, and religious diversity because of centuries of invasions, colonization, migration on top of the indigenous populations. So just to locate Aruba on the map, north of Venezuela and south of Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, and west of many other Caribbean islands. So the name of the country comes from an old Amerindian language spoken on the coast of Venezuela and in the Caribbean islands. And this early human migration and cultural exchange were already part of the cultural pattern of archaic Indians at an early stage. So those early Indians were replaced in the 1st century of our era by the Caqueto Indians, part of the Arawak people, who formed kingdoms, or they were rather chiefdoms, based on political religious alliances more than on military control. So they form a sort of federation of indigenous communities. Those Indians brought with them signs of modernity, progress, ceramics, agriculture that helped develop the economy along with regional trade, especially in salt, canoes, beads, and tobacco. So contact with the Europeans started in the at the end of the 15th century, early 16th century, when the Spanish conquistadores interrupted the expansion of the Caqueto population, and that population was incorporated into the Spanish colonial empire around 1500. And at that time, one of the Spanish conquistadors, Alonso de Ojeda, acquired the exclusive right to exploit this region, the Venezuelan coast, including Aruba, and started to conduct trade and raids over these islands, including for hunting slaves. And then most of the Caquecho people were deported to Hispaniola, which is now shared between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, as forced laborers in the plantations, and many died during the voyage and when there were laborers there. So new Indians migrated from the mainland, which is now Venezuela, to Aruba. But it turned out that the exploitation of the Caribbean islands proved to be unprofitable, and therefore the Spanish settlers moved elsewhere. But other European nations, England, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark, began to explore the possibilities of piracy and trade in that region. So Dutch colonization started in the 17th century. In 1634, the Dutch landed in Aruba, discovered its potential in extracting salt. Salt was useful in the Netherlands for the cheese industry, but also for preserves of fish. So the Dutch fought 3 wars with England, which of course was trying to dominate the region. And there was a peace treaty that actually weakened the Dutch supremacy. So the Caribbean islands actually benefited from this situation because they regained stability and prosperity and experienced fewer changes in the colonial holdings for centuries. So we jump to the 19th century. Britain took back control of Aruba during the Napoleonic Wars from 1806 to 1816, but that didn't last very long. And the Dutch came back. Aruba was returned to Dutch authority, integrated into the colony of Curaçao and dependencies. But despite some economic development, Aruba remained an economically disadvantaged region for almost a century. But then in the 20th century, in the 1920s, crude oil from Venezuela began to be refined in Aruba. And this process of industrialization brought greater prosperity to the island. And this is what actually encouraged Aruba after the Second World War to formulate its first constitution and its first status as an autonomous state within the Netherlands. In 1954, the Charter of the Kingdom of the Netherlands provided the framework for relations between Aruba and the rest of the kingdom. And that created the Netherlands Antilles that united all the Dutch colonies in the Caribbean region into one administrative structure. And the flag that you can see is the flag of the Netherlands Antilles. But many Arubans were unhappy with this arrangement because this policy was perceived as being dominated by their neighbor, Curaçao, whose population was mainly made of descendants of African slaves. So there was a sort of ethnic conflict between the two islands. Now, in the 1970s, Aruba moved forward in its status of autonomy, adopted its own flag that you can see on the slide, and its national anthem. And in 1977, it held a referendum, which was supported by the UN, in which 82 of the participants voted for complete independence. And after a general strike, the Netherlands accepted to work together with Aruba on a report towards independence. And in 1983, there was an agreement on independence to be developed incrementally by stages. And in 1985, Aruba's constitution was unanimously approved as the constitution of a future independent country. And 1 year later, Aruba seceded, left the Federation of the Netherlands Antilles, and after a general election for its first parliament, it became a constituent country of the Netherlands, but with full independence planned for 1996. That means 10 years after the adoption of the constitution. In 1990, it was decided together between Aruba, the Netherlands, and the other Dutch Caribbean islands to postpone Aruba's transition to full independence indefinitely. The constitutional provision scheduling Aruba's complete independence for 1996 was rescinded just 1 year before, in 1995, but it was provided that it could be revived after another referendum. The main reason for this change, the shift of policy from independence to autonomy, was the fact that the oil refinery had closed and the island had lost its economic wealth that had motivated the drive for independence. So now it turned to tourism as its main source of revenue within this status of autonomy within the Netherlands. So the population of Aruba now, if you compare the various types of population by country of birth, obviously the vast majority, 2/3, were born in Aruba, 5% were born in the Netherlands, 20% in other Latin American, Caribbean countries, and now we have, more recently, you have increasing number of refugees from Venezuela, small part from China, and other communities from other countries. So the main origins are Caqueto Indians, Dutch settlers, Spanish settlers, and enslaved Africans. So that would be the core of the Aruba population. But you have other groups of people who settled, the migrants from Venezuela, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Portugal, Greece, Italy, England, France, Germany, West Indies, Indo-Caribbeans, Chinese people, Filipinos, Koreans, Javanese, Levantine Arabs, and Sephardic Jews. So that creates a real diversity, a real mosaic of population. And that is, of course, translated into the languages spoken in Aruba. So you have two official languages, Dutch, of course, which is the sole language for all administration and legal matters, a little bit like in Corsica, as we heard, and Papiamento, which is the Creole language based on Spanish and Portuguese, also with words from Caqueto, Dutch, West African languages, and English. It is the predominant language, and its cultural and historical importance has now been acknowledged and is promoted by the Aruba government. And then you have another list of spoken languages, of course, resulting from colonization, English and Spanish, still spoken by 13% of the population, and also to migrant communities, Portuguese, Chinese, French, and German. Now, in turn, the international status of Aruba is, of course, being part of the Netherlands, but that means that foreign affairs and defense, but also relations with the UN. The UN system are handled by the Netherlands. But Aruba has a special status within the European Union. It's not a member of the EU. Only the Netherlands is a member. But it is part of the overseas countries and territories, and therefore receives support from the European Development Fund. And it's also a member of several international organizations, such as the International Monetary Fund, the ILO, Interpol, the Association of Caribbean States, Caribbean Community as an observer, and the European Union Overseas Countries and Territories Youth Network. So that's an interesting status. It's sort of a hybrid between an autonomous region and an independent state. Now, internally, Aruba is governed by a parliament of 21 members, elected by direct popular vote to serve a 4-year term, and a cabinet composed of 8 members. The governor of Aruba, representing the King of the Netherlands, is also the head of the government and is appointed for a 6-year term by the Dutch king. Aruba's prime minister and deputy prime minister are indirectly elected by the parliament for 4-year terms. And the Aruba government has jurisdiction of most domestic affairs, including education, healthcare, infrastructure. And it is represented in the Dutch capital, The Hague, by a minister plenipotentiary, just like an ambassador representing a foreign country. Aruba's judicial system is based on the Netherlands model, but Aruba has some exception. It's not part of the Law Enforcement Council, doesn't have an ombudsman, and its police force is the law enforcement agency, and it operates district precincts in 4 cities. In terms of cultural and linguistic autonomy, Aruba's culture, as you realize, is a blend of indigenous, African, and European influences, of course, with the presence of the Dutch heritage. Festivities, music, culinary traditions are integral aspects of Aruban culture and education. You have a picture of one of the festivals. Events like Carnival, Dia de Betico celebrate the island's heritage and foster a sense of community among residents. The preservation and promotion of cultural heritage is and are essential components of Aruba's identity. And of course, there are many media, newspapers, radio, TV stations in the main local language. In terms of education, students in the Caribbean Dutch islands were predominantly taught in Spanish until the late 18th century. And the usage of Dutch increased in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And now Dutch serves as the primary language of instruction, with Papamiento taught as a subject in the lower grades of secondary education. Now, the educational systems mirrors the Dutch structure, with public national education financed by the government of Aruba. Education landscape includes a mix of public and private institutions. The University of Aruba, you can see on this photo, is the national university. And in addition, Aruba hosts 3 medical schools. Interestingly enough, because the cabinet only has 8 members, culture is attached to the Ministry of Finance that oversees, among others, the Archaeological Museum, the Cultural Fund, UNESCO Committee, the Union of Cultural Organizations, Music School, History Museum and Monuments Office. And education is managed by Ministry of Education and Sports. That includes the Sports Union, National Library, IDEON Project, Pedagogical Institute, Multilingual Schools, Science and Sustainable Development, University of Aruba, etc. So if you compare now Aruba with the initiative for the autonomy of the Sahara regions, there are similarities. Both entities are an integral part of the kingdom to which they belong, the Dutch kingdom for Aruba and the Moroccan kingdom for the Sahara region, with the population enjoying the same citizenship as those in those kingdoms. Both enjoy or will enjoy a widespread autonomy that includes cultural heritage, languages, and education, but of course excludes foreign policy and defense, which is the sovereign competence of the state, the central state. But Aruba's status, as we've seen, allows it to become a full member of some international organizations. And in the Sahara region, the status will provide for consultations by the Moroccan government on international issues that would affect that region. And the region will be allowed, in consultation with the government, to establish cooperation relations with foreign regions to foster interregional dialogue and cooperation. Both regions elect their parliament and indirectly their government that enact legislation and regulations, including on education and culture, while the king appoints his representative to the autonomous entity. To apply its policy, including on education and culture, the autonomous region benefits from its own resources, including taxation and proceeds from natural resources, but can also receive assistance from the central government and the EU in the case of Aruba. The local languages or dialects in the autonomous region are protected by law and freely practiced in local education, cultural activities, business activities, the media, etc. But there are differences between those two entities. Aruba, of course, as we have seen, is an island separated from the Netherlands by 40,000 kilometers, while the Sahara region is an integral part of Morocco's land territory with full continuity and access. In Morocco, in addition to the kingdom's competence on foreign affairs and defense, the king also keeps its religious prerogatives, while in Aruba, the Dutch authorities have no religious competencies. Aruba keeps its own flag, its own anthem, its own currency, while in Morocco, the kingdom keeps exclusive jurisdiction over the attributes of sovereignty, especially the flag, the national anthem, and the currency. In Morocco, the king's representative to the Sahara region only represents the state there in the region, but does not lead, doesn't head the local government, unlike in Aruba. In terms of language, culture, and religion, each autonomous region has a heritage from its own specific history where colonization played a role. But Aruba has a more diverse situation due to the prehistoric and neo-Indian migrations of indigenous populations, followed by waves of colonial influences, while in the Sahara region, the Sahrawi populations are ethnically more homogeneous. Their languages are less numerous, since the use of the national language is widespread, and they only have one religion, the same as in the rest of the kingdom. So these are the similarities and differences between Aruba and the Sahara region. So I thank you for your attention. And I encourage you to visit that island. It's especially a very exquisite holiday resort visited by many people from North America and Latin America. I stop my sharing. And I think it is now time to conclude our seminar. Of course, I will not repeat all the specific points made by the speakers because, as we have realized, each case is different, each status is different as a result of history, colonization, different cultural influences, migration of population, etc. As we've seen, there are, of course, a number of commonalities with the status proposed by Morocco for the Sahara region. For instance, they all have a more or less advanced system of internal autonomy, while the symbols of sovereignty are kept by the central state, the central government, such as foreign affairs and defense. And we have also some exceptions, with Morocco offering Sahara the possibility of being associated to international relations and regional cooperation. Also, Aruba being member of several international organizations, and Macau having the opportunity to also develop specific cooperation with Portuguese-speaking countries. Regarding now the main issue that we discussed, linguistic, cultural identity and extent of autonomy, again, we see a lot of specificities in the various statutes depending on, again, history and the various processes leading to a more or less advanced form of autonomy. But I think that we can conclude that there are two key elements that were mentioned, addressed in the different presentations. First is the idea of recognition, possibly institutional, constitutional, legal, in a statute, in agreement, which gives some special status to the local specificity, the local language, preferably on an equal footing. And we can see that in Macau, we have this peculiarity of having equal status, although Portuguese is a minority language. And in the Basque Country, we also have this equal status. And the second aspect, of course, the key aspect is not only allowing or permitting or protecting or preserving a language and culture, but also giving the regional authorities the right and the resources to promote this language, this specificity throughout linguistic policy, education, all the other cultural activities. And of course, this requires resources. And of course, it's important that the status of autonomy allows these resources to come either from the region itself, and this is what is promised for the Sahara region, but also, in addition, also resources that are provided by the central government. Like we have seen in Corsica, we're providing the the teaching staff, the administrative framework, etc. So I will not give more details and more because, of course, again, each case is different. But I think we have understood the importance of linguistic and cultural identity and specificity in regimes of autonomy. And when we look at the past cases that we looked at, this issue came up many times, not always, because in some cases you may have regional autonomy without speaking a different language. But in many cases, it is a key aspect of identity, and sometimes this identity must be recognized as a result of efforts, sometimes through a phase of conflict for this autonomy to be recognized. So I will stop here, and I thank you very much for your contribution. Again, this, of course, all the articles will be published by Morocco, and you will receive copies. It will be also available on the website of the Autonomy Network that you can access to look at the proceedings of the previous seminars. And we hope that you can now be part of this network and contribute actively to this work, it's academic work in comparative studies. Thank you very much, and thank you to our audience, and thank you to our interpreters for their very effective work. Thank you, and take care, all of you.